I never thought a single conversation could shatter my world, but there I was, sitting across from Ryan in our tiny living room, staring at him as if he had just declared war. He didn't even look me in the eye. Julia, I found someone else. I think we should cancel the wedding. The words landed like stones in my chest. I felt my heart clench, my breath hitch, but beneath the shock, a strange calm washed over me. Because I knew, I had known for months, quietly piecing together the signs he thought I hadn't noticed. The late nights he claimed were work, the secret phone passwords, the sudden distance. He was playing a game, and I had been watching. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Already done, I said. He froze. What do you mean, already done? I gave him a small, controlled smile, the one I'd practiced in the mirror countless times during sleepless nights. The wedding is canceled. The deposits, the venue, the photographer, everything's taken care of. I handled it last week. The look on his face was priceless. Shock, disbelief, a flicker of panic. He had imagined this confrontation as his moment of control, his dramatic reveal of superiority. But I wasn't reacting the way he expected. Instead, I was calm, composed, measured. You canceled it? Without me? His voice was sharp, tinged with the faintest edge of fear. Yes, Ryan, I did. My voice was steady, but inside, my chest still ached. This was the culmination of months of betrayal, deception, and quiet observation. Every late night, every lie, every fleeting moment of doubt had led me here. I was ready. I had to be. He swallowed hard, struggling to regain some semblance of dominance. Julia, Don't, I interrupted. I know about Gwen. His eyes widened, a faint flicker of guilt, or was it shock, crossing his features. I watched as the mask he wore for months began to crack. I had not accused rashly. I had waited, observed, documented, and now it was time. I reached for my phone, casually scrolling to the banking app I had meticulously checked earlier that morning. Your wedding fund? The money you thought was hidden from me? It's safe. Every penny you contributed has been accounted for. Ryan's jaw tightened. How? I've been planning this, Ryan, for months. Watching, waiting, making sure that when the truth came out, I'd be ready, and I am. The room felt impossibly small, the tension thick enough to taste. Boxes lined the walls, already packed, a silent testament to my quiet preparation for a new life. The wedding that was supposed to be the pinnacle of our love had crumbled before it began, but I wasn't broken. I was stronger, sharper, and entirely unbound by his lies. I hope you're happy, he muttered, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. I am, I said softly, and for the first time in months, I believed it. I was 27 when I first met Ryan. At the time, I was finishing my master's degree, juggling late nights at the library with part-time work at a local design studio. Independent, focused, determined. I prided myself on keeping my life organized, my emotions in check. Then he walked into my world like a storm disguised as calm, with that easy smile, confident stride, and eyes that seemed to see right through me. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I remember him leaning against the kitchen counter, casually charming everyone with jokes I didn't quite understand, but laughed at anyway. Something about the way he listened, really listened, drew me in. He asked questions that made me feel interesting, seen, alive. By the end of the night, I knew he was different. That night, I went home with a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Our courtship was intoxicating. Dinner dates, weekend getaways, late-night drives where we'd talk until the stars disappeared behind the dawn. I felt like I had found someone who matched my energy, my intellect, my ambition. He was thoughtful, or so I believed. He remembered the small things, my favorite coffee order, the way my hands shook when I was nervous, my love for books with worn pages. I gave myself entirely to him, perhaps too quickly, swept up in the whirlwind of possibility. The first time I met his family, I was nervous, as anyone would be. Ryan had always spoken fondly of his parents, and I wanted to make a good impression. His mother was warm, polite, the kind of woman who smiled as if she already liked you. His father, more reserved, scrutinized me quietly, asking pointed questions about my job, my plans, my intentions. I tried to reassure myself I was the capable one, the reliable one, the one who would fit seamlessly into their lives. Ryan was affectionate, often holding my hand during dinners, whispering small reassurances that I was doing fine. Over the years, we built a rhythm. Our apartment was cozy, full of small, shared rituals. Sunday morning coffee on the balcony, weekly dinners with friends, birthday surprises. Ryan often joked about our perfect system, dividing finances carefully, planning trips, and even keeping a small wedding fund tucked away for when the day finally came. I trusted him, believed in us, never imagining that trust could be a weapon against me. And yet, there were signs. Tiny, almost imperceptible at first. Late nights he couldn't explain. Subtle changes in his tone, a flicker of defensiveness when I asked about his day. He became secretive with his phone, suddenly protective of passwords he once shared freely. I dismissed these moments, telling myself I was overthinking. After all, he had never given me a reason not to trust him, had he? I loved him deeply. I believed in us. And I thought that love would shield me from the possibility that the person I adored could also be the person who would hurt me most. But beneath the surface, cracks had already begun to form, invisible to the untrained eye, unnoticed because I wanted to see only the man I loved, not the one capable of deception. In retrospect, those months leading up to the engagement, the planning of the wedding, the choice of the venue, the meticulous selection of dresses and invitations, were a mirror of what was to come. Ryan played the role of the devoted partner flawlessly, while I unknowingly stepped into a carefully crafted illusion. And behind that illusion was Gwen, waiting quietly, patiently, ready to replace me. That's why, when I finally sat him down to hear him confess his betrayal, the words didn't catch me completely off guard. I had suspected, I had prepared, and though my heart ached, my mind was already several steps ahead, calculating, anticipating, and ready to reclaim the control I had once handed to him willingly. At first, the changes were subtle, so subtle that I questioned my own perception. Ryan started coming home later, sometimes claiming extra hours at work, sometimes vague excuses about traffic or client meetings. His once open phone now became a fortress. He would swipe to lock it the moment I walked into the room. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the way he avoided my eyes, the flicker of something unspoken that I could sense but not name. Friends began to notice, too. Casual remarks from those close to him, seemingly innocent, hinted at things I hadn't yet connected. "He's been acting strange lately," one friend said over coffee, a faint worry in her eyes. Another mentioned Ryan's new coworker, Gwen, a charismatic, charming woman who somehow seemed to linger in conversations just a little too long. I laughed it off at first. After all, I trusted him. But deep inside, a knot of unease began to tighten. Family interactions became a minefield. His mother, usually warm and approachable, seemed distracted, her eyes darting toward him with subtle concern. His father, Theodore, increasingly pulled me aside during gatherings, quietly hinting at inconsistencies he had noticed in Ryan's stories. "I'm not saying anything for certain," he would say cautiously, "but keep your eyes open." I appreciated his concern, but part of me resented it. I wanted to believe in Ryan, to shield myself from the possibility of betrayal. Then came the first moments of real tension. A missed dinner, an unexplained late night, a hurried text that he swore was work-related. I felt the chill of doubt for the first time, a gnawing anxiety that refused to be ignored. My mind replayed every detail, the sudden change in tone, the small white lies that accumulated into a quiet, persistent unease. Each one, taken alone, was trivial. Together, they were a pattern, a breadcrumb trail leading to a truth I wasn't ready to face. I began to test him subtly, casual questions about his day, mentions of Gwen, even passing comments about loyalty and honesty. He deflected, smiled too quickly, joked too loudly. The tension in the room was almost tangible, like a storm cloud that had been gathering quietly over our heads. And still, part of me wanted to believe the best in him, to cling to the man I loved rather than the man who was slowly slipping away. The anxiety bled into my nights. I lay awake, listening to the hum of the city outside, thinking about the small inconsistencies, replaying his words, analyzing his every gesture. I started keeping mental notes, a private ledger of actions and reactions that didn't align. It became almost like a puzzle, each piece revealing more of the picture I had been too afraid to assemble. And yet, despite the unease, life continued. We laughed, we planned, we argued over trivialities, as any couple did. But beneath the surface, the air was heavier, the silences longer. The unspoken tension between us became a quiet companion, one I carried with me even as I smiled, even as I pretended that everything was normal. Those months planted the seeds of conflict, seeds that would grow, unnoticed by Ryan, unnoticed by me, until they erupted into a confrontation that would change everything. Each late night, each secretive glance, each small lie was a warning. And though I did not yet know the full truth, I began to prepare, quietly fortifying myself for the day when the illusion would shatter and reality would demand action. It was a quiet Thursday evening, the kind where the city hums softly outside your window and the world feels like it's holding its breath. Ryan had claimed to be stuck at work again, though I knew better. Something in his rhythm, his half smile during our video call earlier, didn't align with the stories he'd told me. My gut tightened, a familiar knot of suspicion. I waited, not long. Just enough time for him to leave his iPad on the kitchen counter, logged in, unattended. My hands trembled as I reached for it, an internal battle raging. Part of me screamed not to look, to trust him, to preserve the world I had built around us. But another part, the part that had been awake for months, knew that hesitation would only prolong the inevitable. The messages were there, clear as day. Gwen. Late-night dinners, secret trips, gifts I'd never been told about. Ryan had been planning this for months, weaving lies so effortlessly that I had almost convinced myself of his honesty. My chest tightened, my heart pounded. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my hands cold and clammy against the smooth glass of the iPad. I didn't cry, not yet. There wasn't time. I needed to act, to think, to process. I read everything, taking in every detail, letting the reality settle, crystallize, and then I called him. Ryan, I said, my voice low, controlled, but laced with a sharp edge. We need to talk, now. He answered casually, a thin veil of charm that had fooled me countless times before. Julia, what's wrong? Can this wait? No, I said, trying to keep my breathing steady. It can't. When he walked through the door, I was waiting, calm, collected. But inside, I felt the storm I had held back for months threatening to explode. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the iPad I had placed conspicuously on the counter. Recognition, and then fear, flickered across his face. Julia, he began. Save it, I interrupted. I know about Gwen, about everything. His expression shifted. Confusion, denial, then a fleeting flash of guilt. I can explain. Explain? My voice rose slightly, sharper now. You've been sneaking around for months, lying to my face, making me believe in a life that never existed. And you call that love? He faltered, searching for words, gestures, anything to regain control. I watched him struggle, the confident man I had loved, reduced to a mess of excuses. I felt a surge of both sadness and fury, the two emotions colliding in my chest. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, he stammered. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet apartment. Didn't mean to? Ryan, you were planning to leave me. You were choosing her over me, over everything we had built. And you think it wasn't intentional? He tried to step closer, to reach for my hand. I recoiled instinctively, the physical manifestation of months of betrayal, the instinct to protect the self I had poured so much love into. You've been careless, I said quietly, my eyes boring into his. Every late night, every lie, every secret phone password, it all added up, and I saw it. I didn't want to see it, but I did, and now it's too late to deny it. Ryan's shoulders slumped. His voice, once commanding and sure, was now unsteady. I love you, Julia. I didn't want to hurt you. Love? I repeated, my voice breaking slightly despite my efforts. Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't hide, doesn't manipulate, doesn't betray. You've shown me who you really are, Ryan, and I am done being blind. For a long moment, silence filled the apartment. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, the faint traffic outside, the unrelenting beat of my heart. I could feel my body shaking, not from weakness, but from the intensity of holding back tears, anger, and the raw grief of shattered trust. Then I made my decision. Calmly, deliberately, I picked up my phone, opened the banking app, and showed him the proof. Every penny he thought was hidden, every secret transaction accounted for and safe. His eyes widened. You knew? I knew, I said, and I've been preparing for this moment, for you. The look on his face, shock, fear, disbelief, was almost satisfying, a mirror of the chaos he had caused me over months. But I didn't gloat. I was above that. I was simply reclaiming my life, my dignity, and the control he had tried so desperately to steal. For the first time, I realized the truth. I was stronger than the betrayal, stronger than the heartbreak, and ready to face the consequences of his choices. The first hours after confronting Ryan were a whirlwind of emotions. My apartment, once a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. Every corner reminded me of the life I had invested in, the trust I had given freely, now fractured beyond repair. I paced, my hands tangled in my hair, my mind racing faster than my heartbeat. How could I have missed the signs? The late nights, the secrecy, the subtle lies. They were all there, and yet I had chosen to believe. I sank onto the sofa, the silence pressing in. My chest ached, not from physical exertion, but from the weight of betrayal. I replayed our conversations in my head, dissecting his every word, every glance, trying to pinpoint the moment when the facade had truly begun. Was it the first dinner he stayed late at work unexpectedly? Or the week he seemed distracted, distant, yet charming? My rational mind cataloged everything. My emotional self refused to let go of the hurt. A storm of questions consumed me. Did I miss the warnings? Was I too trusting? Am I foolish? Guilt mingled with anger. Anger at Ryan, yes, but also at myself. For ignoring the subtle alarms, for pretending all was well while my intuition whispered otherwise. I felt a strange duality, betrayed and complicit at the same time. Then came the practical side of me, the one I had honed over months of careful observation. I couldn't let emotions dictate my next move entirely. I began to plan, quietly, deliberately. Ryan might have believed he was the one in control, but now, with the knowledge of his affair and his manipulations, I held the leverage, the wedding fund, the secret accounts, the careful documentation of his missteps. All of it became a safety net, a shield to protect the life I was about to reclaim. Yet even as I strategized, the heartache persisted. I thought of the life we had envisioned, the apartment filled with laughter, the wedding that was supposed to celebrate our love, the quiet evenings where we dreamed of a future together. All of that had been built on illusions, now crumbling in the harsh light of truth. My vision blurred with tears I refused to shed openly, pride and sorrow warring within me. I decided I needed one more confrontation, not a fiery argument, not a desperate plea, but a calm, unwavering declaration of boundaries. When Ryan returned later that evening, I was waiting. He approached cautiously, the earlier shock still etched on his face. "Julia, I didn't mean for this," he started, voice tentative. I held up my hand, cutting him off. Don't start with explanations. Don't try to salvage your story. I've seen enough. I know everything." His eyes darted to the iPad on the counter, to the banking app showing every transaction he thought was hidden. Panic flickered across his features, mingled with the faintest glimmer of regret. You've been planning this?" "Not planning," I corrected, my voice steady, measured, observing, waiting, protecting myself. "For months, while you thought you were in control, I was watching. And now it's over, Ryan. The life you wanted? Gone. The trust you destroyed? Irretrievable." He swallowed hard, words failing him. I could see the fear, the dawning realization that his carefully crafted manipulation had unraveled. And yet, I felt no satisfaction in his discomfort. My focus wasn't on revenge. It was on reclaiming my power, on stepping out of the shadow of deceit he had cast over my life. After a long pause, I spoke again, softer this time, but no less firm. "I need time, space, distance from you. I need to rebuild the life I thought I shared with someone who truly loved me. You've chosen your path, and I'm choosing mine." Ryan nodded, silence stretching between us like a chasm. He had nothing more to say, and in that moment, I realized something profound. The confrontation was not about him, it was about me, my self-respect, and my refusal to be complicit in the betrayal any longer. As he left the apartment, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to exhale. My body sagged, exhausted from the emotional exertion, but my mind felt clearer than it had in months. The storm had passed, and though the wreckage remained, I could begin to navigate through it, guided by the knowledge that I had acted with strength, clarity, and dignity. For the first time since discovering the affair, I allowed a small, fragile sense of relief. I was still standing. I was still in control of my life. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I would walk it on my own terms, refusing to let the shadow of Ryan's betrayal define me. The following days blurred into a tense, exhausting rhythm. Ryan, though aware I had discovered everything, still tried to assert some control, sending apologetic texts, half-hearted explanations, and at times, veiled threats. But it wasn't just him. The ripple effects of betrayal extended outward, reaching into circles I had thought safe, his family and our mutual friends. It started subtly. Ryan's sister, Claudia, called me one evening, her voice syrupy, falsely sympathetic. "Julia, maybe you're overreacting. Ryan didn't mean anything by it. Can't you just forgive and forget?" I felt a flush of anger rise, my hands gripping the phone tightly. "Forgive? Forget?" I asked, my voice calm but icy. "You mean pretend nothing happened while he lied to my face for months?" "No, Claudia, I cannot," she stammered. "But he's your fiancé. You're ruining everything." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. I'm not the one who ruined everything. He did, and I refuse to let anyone, even family, gaslight me into thinking otherwise. The calls didn't stop. Friends I once considered allies began to tiptoe around me, hesitant, whispering fragments of Ryan's narrative, that I was overreacting, controlling, unfair. I could feel the tide of doubt trying to creep into my mind, subtle, insidious, but I refused it entry. I held on to the truth I had meticulously uncovered. Every message, every financial record, every lie Ryan had told was documented. I had proof, and I was not afraid to use it if necessary. Meanwhile, Ryan escalated his attempts at manipulation. He started leaving small items of his around my apartment, pretending casual intimacy, as though I hadn't already seen the truth. Notes, flowers, even old gifts, all staged to remind me of the love I had once felt. I ignored them, every fiber of my being screaming that acknowledgement of his presence would only grant him power I no longer intended to share. The family, sensing their favored son in jeopardy, intensified their pressure. Phone calls, text messages, even unexpected visits, each designed to wear me down, to make me feel isolated, guilty, and inadequate. But I began to notice something remarkable. The more they tried to sway me, the more I anchored myself in my own reality. I no longer sought validation from Ryan or his family. My sense of self, once entwined with his, was separating, solidifying. It wasn't just psychological warfare. Financial threads pulled taut, too. Ryan attempted to recover control of certain shared assets, sending frantic emails demanding access to accounts and funds. But every request was met with calm, calculated responses. I had prepared and I acted methodically, ensuring that every step he attempted was countered by law, logic, or irrefutable evidence. Then came the social escalation. Friends who had once been neutral became pawns in his game, recounting his version of events, subtly twisting the narrative. Invitations to gatherings were rescinded, casual messages went unanswered, and I could feel the social isolation pressing against my boundaries. But I refused to shrink. Instead, I leaned into it, using solitude to reflect, strategize, and strengthen. One evening, Ryan confronted me directly, his demeanor aggressive, desperate. "Julia, why are you doing this? Why can't you just act like this never happened?" I met his eyes, unflinching. "Because it did happen, Ryan. You lied. You cheated. You tried to manipulate me, my friends, even your own family, to maintain your illusion of control. I'm done pretending, and I refuse to let you drag me down with you." He raised his voice, a mix of frustration and disbelief. "You think you're in control now? You're isolated. Everyone is against you. You'll see how lonely this feels." I smiled faintly, coldly. Lonely? Maybe. But alone is not powerless. I have truth, evidence, and my own clarity. You have only your lies and your fear. He faltered, unsteady, realizing that the strategy he had relied on, intimidation, persuasion, social pressure, was failing. The more he tried, the more resolute I became. Every calculated step he took to regain dominance only reinforced my awareness of his deceit and my own strength. By the end of the week, Ryan's network of influence began to crumble under the weight of documented truth. Mutual friends who had doubted me started seeing inconsistencies in his stories, subtle contradictions, casual slips in his narrative, and the unmistakable evidence I held painted a clear picture. I was not the villain. Ryan was. I noticed the transformation in myself as well. The Julia who had been hesitant, unsure, and dependent on approval had evolved. She was analytical, yet emotionally grounded, aware, yet uncompromising, strong without arrogance. I began to recognize my own resilience and worth, independent of his validation or his world. The betrayal, which had once felt like a death sentence to my happiness, was becoming a catalyst for my personal growth. By the time Ryan realized that his attempts at escalation were futile, I had already begun reclaiming my life piece by piece. The apartment, the financial security, the narrative itself, everything was slowly returning to me. And for the first time, I felt not just relief, but empowerment. The storm had passed through, but I had endured, stronger, wiser, and unshaken. The silence in my apartment that night was deafening. The usual hum of the city outside, once comforting, now sounded distant, almost mocking. I sank into the armchair by the window, staring at the streetlights flickering through the rain-soaked glass. Everything I had believed in, the love, the future, the trust, had evaporated. Ryan's betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was a gaping void that swallowed months, even years, of my life. I felt utterly alone. Friends who had sided with him, even temporarily, seemed to vanish into the shadows of my life. Messages went unanswered, calls ignored. The social network I had relied upon for support had disintegrated overnight, leaving me with nothing but echoes of doubt and sorrow. Even the apartment, my supposed sanctuary, felt alien, walls closing in, the furniture a silent witness to the life I had lost. Anger surged, hot and jagged, only to crash into a deeper, more corrosive pain. I hated Ryan, yes, but I hated myself too. Why had I trusted so blindly? Why had I ignored the creeping signs, the tiny inconsistencies that now screamed betrayal? My heart ached with the knowledge that love could be so cruel, that the person I had invested in most deeply could turn into a stranger, a predator, cloaked in familiarity. I remembered the wedding dress in his closet, still untouched, the flowers I had picked, the menu we had discussed, the guest list meticulously curated, all of it meaningless now. My dreams had been stolen piece by piece, yet the thief was smiling, untouchable, shielded by charm and manipulation. The unfairness of it all was suffocating. Tears came unbidden, hot and bitter. I curled into myself on the floor, shivering not from cold, but from the rawness of heartbreak. Every memory of Ryan, the whispered promises, the laughter, the shared plans, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I questioned everything, my judgment, my worth, my ability to trust again. The world outside continued, indifferent, while inside I existed in a vacuum of betrayal. Even my carefully laid plans, the strategies I had crafted to protect myself, seemed hollow in the face of emotional devastation. Money, proof, legal safeguards, they were irrelevant here. They could not mend the emptiness, the loneliness, the sense of being profoundly violated. I had all the logic in the world on my side, but my heart was fractured, bleeding into every quiet moment. I thought of Ryan's face when he realized I knew. The shock, the desperation, the flicker of fear, briefly satisfying, but it didn't erase the ache. I realized then that no one would fix this for me. No apologies, no restitution, no rational arguments could fill the void left by betrayal. I had to face it alone, fully, brutally, without flinching. Sleep eluded me. I wandered from room to room, staring at objects that once brought joy and now reminded me of deceit. The photos on the shelf, the small mementos, the little notes of affection, all were ghosts, mocking reminders of a life that had never truly been mine. The isolation felt endless. Even my own thoughts seemed to conspire against me, replaying every error, every oversight, every naive moment when I had believed in him. And yet, beneath the despair, a tiny ember of awareness flickered. I noticed faintly that despite the betrayal, despite the loneliness, I was still standing. I was breathing. I had survived this far. It was a small, fragile realization, almost imperceptible in the torrent of grief, but it existed. I allowed myself to acknowledge it quietly, without fanfare or false optimism. I could feel the first hints of strength rising from the ashes of my heartbreak, even if I didn't yet trust it fully. The darkest night of betrayal had arrived. I was stripped bare, emotionally exposed, confronted with the rawest form of loss. Every plan, every expectation, every dream had been shattered. And yet somewhere in the void, I sensed that the story wasn't over. That strength could emerge from despair, clarity from confusion, and autonomy from the chains of manipulation. For the first time, I understood the truth of the moment. Hitting rock bottom was not the end. It was a beginning, a brutal, painful, yet necessary awakening. And in that realization, fragile though it was, I felt a whisper of possibility. The dawn after that long, dark night arrived with a muted light filtering through the blinds. I felt hollow, yet strangely alert, as if the bleakness of yesterday had cleared my mind, leaving it sharp and precise. The chaos of betrayal still lingered, but my emotional fog was lifting. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "You are stronger than this. You are not powerless." I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, documents scattered around me. Over the past days, I had compiled everything. Screenshots of Ryan's texts, his secret bank transfers, proof of his affair, and all the contradictory stories he had told to friends and family. Every piece of evidence, once overwhelming in its sheer volume, now felt like ammunition, tools I could wield to reclaim control. Then a message pinged on my phone. It was from Theodore, Ryan's father. Calm, measured, and authoritative. "Julia, I've reviewed some unusual activity on accounts I co-own with Ryan. It seems he's been less than honest. Call me when you're ready." The voice of reason, an ally, someone untainted by Ryan's manipulations. I called immediately, my heart pounding, anticipation and fear colliding in my chest. Theodore listened carefully as I recounted the entire timeline. He asked questions, probed gently, and finally said, "Julia, you're not imagining anything. He's been deceptive and reckless. You have every right to protect yourself, and there are ways to ensure he cannot harm you further." Hearing it from someone outside the emotional whirlwind, someone respected and neutral, gave me clarity. It wasn't paranoia or overreaction. This was reality, and I had the right, and even the responsibility, to assert myself. The breakthrough came when I discovered the full extent of Ryan's secret accounts and hidden transactions. The amounts, though modest individually, revealed a calculated pattern. He had been siphoning money, lying about contributions, and covering his tracks meticulously. Each revelation ignited a mix of outrage and empowerment. This wasn't just betrayal of the heart. It was betrayal in every aspect: trust, finances, integrity. And now I had the truth. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my agency. I wasn't a passive victim. I wasn't helpless. Every document, every message, every record in my possession became a symbol of control. I could confront him, expose the truth, and reclaim my life legally and morally. I sat back and breathed deeply. I remembered the girl who had loved him without question, who had ignored small red flags and brushed aside doubts. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone fierce, intelligent, and unyielding. Betrayal had not destroyed me. It had refined me. That afternoon, I made a decision. I would confront Ryan, not with desperation, but with certainty. I would not beg, plead, or negotiate. I would set boundaries, assert my rights, and reclaim everything he had tried to manipulate me out of. And I would do it calmly, strategically, without letting anger cloud judgment. I drafted a detailed letter outlining the facts, including evidence of his affair, financial discrepancies, and the undeniable truth of his deceit. I prepared copies for legal advisors, Theodore, and myself. Every word was precise, controlled, and unassailable. I wasn't asking for justice. I was claiming it. As I read through those documents one final time, I felt a surge of clarity and confidence unlike anything I had experienced in weeks. The fear that had gripped me in the dark moments was replaced with purpose. I knew that once I took these steps, nothing would hold me back. Ryan could no longer manipulate, gaslight, or control me. The power balance had shifted. That evening, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The eyes staring back were the eyes of someone who had endured, suffered, and emerged stronger. A subtle smile curved my lips, not of triumph over him, but of recognition of my own worth. This was the moment I stepped out of the shadow of betrayal and into my own light. The turning point wasn't just about exposing Ryan, it was about reclaiming myself. I realized finally that my value was independent of him, his family, or the illusions he had created. I had the right to protect my heart, my life, and my future. And in that understanding, I found not only power, but peace. By the time Ryan realized I had uncovered everything, I was no longer the same person who had once loved him blindly. The Julia he had tried to manipulate no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had faced betrayal head-on, claimed her agency, and refused to be diminished by lies or deceit. The morning after I confronted Ryan, the world seemed to shift subtly, as if the universe itself acknowledged the new balance. The fallout began quietly but swiftly, like ripples spreading from a stone thrown into still water. I watched it unfold, calm and observant, knowing I had set the stage weeks ago with preparation and evidence. Ryan's facade crumbled first in his social circle. Friends who had once admired him now approached cautiously, whispers of disbelief following him like shadows. He tried explanations, half-truths, even feigned ignorance, but the truth was undeniable. Screenshots, bank statements, texts, all meticulously documented, left no room for spin. Each attempt to defend himself only highlighted his dishonesty. Theodore, once a measured presence in the background, now became an active force. Calmly, he made it clear to Ryan that any further manipulation or attempts to access accounts would be met with legal consequences. He had seen the extent of Ryan's deceit, both personal and financial, and his disappointment was palpable. Ryan's father, once a figure whose approval Ryan sought, now stood firmly against him. That alone shook Ryan to his core. Meanwhile, the fallout spread to Ryan's professional life. Those who had worked closely with him, who had admired his charm and confidence, now questioned his integrity. The affair, financial mismanagement, and blatant manipulation painted a clear picture of someone untrustworthy. Colleagues began distancing themselves, wary of association. The professional reputation Ryan had carefully curated began eroding faster than he could react. For Julia, me, the experience was starkly different. I moved through these days with a strange serenity. Friends who had supported me rallied quietly, offering reassurance, and in some cases, apologies for having doubted my instincts. Conversations I had once feared, explaining the affair, the deceit, the betrayal, were met with empathy and validation. I felt a renewed connection with my community, one built not on appearances or false pretenses, but on truth and integrity. Ryan, predictably, attempted one final desperate play. He reached out to mutual acquaintances, tried to rewrite the narrative, paint himself as the victim, manipulate emotions with selective truths. But by then, the damage was done. His efforts felt like echoes in an empty room, loud but meaningless. People who mattered, who understood the full story, saw through the charade immediately. In the midst of the chaos, I organized the final logistics of separating our lives, closing joint accounts, reclaiming personal property, ensuring all legal boundaries were respected. Each step was deliberate, calculated, yet carried out with calm assurance rather than malice. I wasn't seeking revenge, I was reclaiming peace. And peace, once stolen, is infinitely more satisfying when returned with dignity rather than drama. Interestingly, Ryan's attempts to control the narrative externally only accelerated his isolation. Friends who had once defended him began to question their loyalty. Mutual acquaintances, aware of the evidence, stopped engaging in gossip that could favor him. His reputation, carefully crafted over years, disintegrated rapidly under the weight of truth. I noticed, too, the psychological shift in Ryan. The confidence that had once defined him was replaced by unease, anxiety, and eventually resignation. He realized that the power he had tried to wield was gone, not taken by force, but stripped away by the clarity of honesty and preparation. Witnessing this was a strange form of closure, not joy, not satisfaction in revenge, but the quiet recognition that integrity ultimately prevails. By the time I packed the last of my things into my new apartment, Ryan's attempts to influence my life had effectively ended. The apartment, the wedding plans, even the illusion of a shared future, all were behind me. Stepping into my new space, I felt the weight of betrayal lift, replaced by a profound sense of autonomy. This was my life, reclaimed. Even Theodore's guidance ensured that Ryan could not exploit any remaining financial or legal loopholes. The term deposit, once a point of contention, had been secured in a way that honored its original purpose without giving Ryan any leverage. Every safeguard I had put in place now functioned seamlessly, a testament to planning, patience, and vigilance. Friends and family who had witnessed my ordeal now saw a different Julia, one transformed by hardship, not broken by it, resilient, not resentful, clear-eyed, not blinded by emotional chaos. Their support, both practical and emotional, reinforced the idea that betrayal, no matter how profound, could not define me. And Ryan? He faded from the periphery of my life as swiftly as his influence had appeared. The whispers, the frantic calls, the desperate attempts to rewrite reality, they all ended. I moved forward with a quiet strength, an unshakable understanding that life, when grounded in truth and self-respect, cannot be derailed by deceit. The fallout had been total for him, but restorative for me. Every lie exposed, every manipulation countered, every false narrative corrected. These were the bricks that rebuilt my foundation. I had been through the fire and emerged intact, wiser, stronger, and fully myself. The first morning in my new apartment, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors, warm and unjudging. I sat with a cup of coffee, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, and felt something I hadn't in months: peace. The chaos, betrayal, and manipulation were behind me. The air felt lighter, as if every breath carried away the weight of the past. I allowed myself to reflect, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I had survived betrayal, deception, and the unraveling of a life I had once believed was secure. I had planned carefully, acted deliberately, and defended my worth. In doing so, I discovered something invaluable. My strength was never contingent on anyone else, and my happiness was mine to define. Friends reached out, old connections deepened, and I began to build a life rooted in honesty and mutual respect. I even started dating again, cautiously, aware now of the importance of boundaries and transparency. Ryan was a shadow in my rearview mirror, a reminder of what I had endured and overcome, not a force that could influence my present. From this experience, I carried a lesson I wanted to share with anyone listening. Recognize the people in your life for who they truly are. When someone shows you deception or disrespect, acknowledge it, but don't let it destroy you. Instead, take control of your narrative, protect your values, and move forward with courage. Life is not about avoiding betrayal, but about navigating it with integrity and emerging stronger. I smiled, imagining the life ahead, one of autonomy, clarity, and self-respect. The engagement, the wedding plans, the illusions of love and trust, they were all part of my story, but they no longer defined me. I had learned to reclaim my power, honor my emotions, and build a future that reflected my own choices. The final message I want to leave is simple. Betrayal can break trust, but it cannot break your spirit unless you allow it. Stand firm, gather your truth, and step into the life you deserve. I did, and in doing so, I found not just survival, but a profound sense of freedom. As I looked out at the city skyline, I realized I was ready for anything. The past was behind me, and the future, uncertain, vibrant, and entirely mine, stretched out ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I felt fully alive.